Hi class, so today we are starting chapter 1 part 1a, and we're also learning how to take our notes. So on page 1 of your notes you will see that there are two places for your ICANNs today under 1.1. We're going to write them both down. The first one is I can find and compare absolute value. The second one is I can solve real-world problems involving absolute value. What I need you to do now is make sure you have both of these in your first page I can statements. Pause the video right now to get those in. Alright class, I need you to turn to page 3. So on page 3, up at the very top, you will see the word topic. So this topic is what we're going to be learning today. And so here's our topic. And it says 1.1 integers and absolute value. That's already typed in your notes for you. Okay? So our essential question today is, how do I find the absolute value of an integer? And then again, that's also already typed on page 3. So this is where you are going to start taking notes. So when I highlight something, that means it's in your, there's a line for it on your notes. So the first line is integers, and then you have those semicolons, positive and negative, whole numbers, and 0. Okay, so make sure you pause the video right now and get those in the 5 blanks that you have on that first section. Alright, now that you have those written down, some examples of an integer would be what's labeled here. Okay. Some other lovely examples would be like 100 or negative 100 or, I don't know, 1,572. Those are all examples of integers. But what is not an integer is 1/2 or negative 1/2, because those are not whole numbers. Okay, another example of not an integer would be 0.2 or 200.4. Also not an integer. So pause the video, write those things down. Now, we're going to talk about absolute value. Absolute value is simply the distance. So absolute value goes on the next line, is the distance between the number and 0 on a number line. I like to think of it as how many steps until I reach 0. That's already typed out for you. Now, we have a really fancy way in math to write this, and it's this line, then the number, and then the other line. And it's read as the absolute value of x. Okay? And so let's talk about this. On your paper, copy that down. And we're going to do our examples. Okay? And these are both examples of what it is. Okay? So pause the video, copy this down. Now that you have this down, let's talk about it. So I'm going to change my color to my highlighter to red. So we're going to look at this first one, the absolute value of -4. Okay? That is right here where I put the highlighter. Now, I'm going to count how many steps it takes me to get from this number, -4, all the way over to 0. All right, so let's count this. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4. It took me 4 steps. So the answer of absolute value of -4 is 4. Okay? All right, I'm going to change my highlighter color to blue to match the absolute value of 4. Again, I'm going to start at my number 4, and I'm going to take my steps to 0. 1, 2, 3, 4. How many steps did I take? I took 4 steps, so the answer to the absolute value of 4 is 4. All right, so now we already did our examples, but let's talk about some non-examples. So if I had the absolute value of -4, absolute value symbol is or equal, a non-example would say, well, it's -4. Absolute values always come out as positive numbers, okay? Always, always. Another non-example would be, say I had absolute value of 5 is -5. This does not work. These are non-examples. So when I say non-examples, I mean that is sign turns to is not. And that's what that line between from on the equal sign means, is not. So let's practice a few. Let's try a few by ourselves. So we're going to do this next one. We have 4 spots, so write these in the 4 spots for you. Pause the video and write these in. Okay? You need to write in 1 is 7, 2 is -1, 3 is -5, and 4 is 14. So I'm going to write them in just like you guys are. So I'm going to say the absolute value of 7, absolute value symbol is something, absolute value of -1, absolute value symbol, absolute value of 5, and so this is what your paper should look like now. All right, so pause the video and figure out how many steps, or what's the absolute value of 7? How many steps did you travel from 7 to 0? Then do that for number 2. How many steps did you take from -1 to get to 0? How many steps did you get from -5 to 0? And how many steps did you get from 14 to 0? All right, that's the end of today's video. I hope you have a great night. Bye.